Yeah.
How are you? Let me try and get a little better angle here. Is that too bright behind me? Is that better?
You're good. Oh my God, I love your bookcase. It's
Oh,
so
thank you. It's built into the wall.
that's very fancy. I love it.
Soup switcher from gracefully fed. Soup switcher, say bye bye to bread. If gluten's been a bitch, then ditch her with soup switcher.
So good to see you.
God, it's so good to see you. I haven't seen you in forever.
Yeah, you look the same, to your credit.
Well, I think that's a good thing, and I think
Yeah.
you look the same, which is a great thing.
And thank you for the soups. That was really exceptional. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad you had them, and I'm, all the good things. I mean, I'm so happy to talk to you, and you're doing this. I know how busy you are.
No, I'm really happy to talk to you too. And there's been just like so many things health wise that have been just like circulating and really trying to like get my own handle on like eating and food and portions. So this is actually really coming at a very interesting time because I'm
Oh, really?
so excited to talk to you about it.
Okay, good. Well, I'll just like do a brief,
Great.
I want to introduce you, but it's weird. You don't need an introduction. I'm like at an award show because it's so true. I was like, you know what? I'm going to list some of her achievements. And then I was like going through them. I'm like, what don't you do?
But you can give a personal introduction. I'll just sit here and be quiet until you tell me to speak.
Okay, great. Well, this is Mayim, and these are her achievements. You were on Big Bang Theory, which we worked together on, so people know that's how we met. One of my favorites of all time is Blossom. I don't know if I ever told you this, but I actually had a hat collection because of you. Most recently on Call Me Kat, and you got a second season. Congratulations. That's amazing, which is
Thank
super
you.
exciting. I actually just spoke to Michelle Zenzar and Nikki Laurie and, Rhiannon, we were talking about you because Michelle was saying that you have such a great crew on that show. Everyone's so nice. I'm like, it doesn't surprise me that Mayim surrounds herself by really nice people.
Thank you very much. That's really nice.
Pretty nice. You're an author and you're a cookbook author, which is amazing. You're a neuroscientist, which we all know, which, that's easy to get, right? Like you podcast too, which is really successful as well. You're a mom, you're a feminist, you're all these wonderful things. But I think what's really impressive, the most out of all these achievements, is that you also have your own soup recipes.
Yes, I am not as accomplished as you in the soup department, but yes, I hail from a long line of very dedicated cookers and bakers. And yes, my ethnic heritage absolutely determines that we have to have soup. So almost every meal has soup. That's a formal meal.
Oh my God, I love it. So tell me what's going on. I mean, like you're saying you have health issues. And do you think it's just like a precaution to COVID, or you're actually going through stuff that you're changing your diet?
Well, I think that, it's kind of, what this is going to be a very broad answer that will then get very specific.
Okay.
When I was a teenager, when I was like, in junior high and high school, I had this image, and I don't know who sold it to me, that like at a certain point you become an adult and you have like everything figured out and you get married, you have kids, you live your life. And I wish someone would have given me a heads up that like, your life is just decade after decade of different kinds of maturing and evolution.
Oh, yeah.
And but I didn't know. I didn't know that I'd be like thinking this hard about like my joints and my body and my health. Like it just feels like it's kind of, there's always something new to uncover. So what I've discovered is that, and I've talked about this, my podcast is called Mayim Bialik's Breakdown, and it's a mental health podcast. But one of the things we've talked about that comes up a lot is disordered eating, they call it, and I've been public about, essentially having an eating disorder evolve at 40, which is very late in my opinion, from what I've heard, like from other people. But what it came down to was, for whatever reason, a lot of things going on in my life, I started using food, really to soothe, and instead of feeling or processing emotions. So what has happened is, well, it's like, and it happens to so many people, but like combined with all the other things, like for me, it's been a real re-examination of how much am I supposed to eat, what actually nourishes me, and being conscious of what my body feels like when I eat a ton of processed food versus when I eat foods that are not highly processed and are closer to the way that the earth makes them. So it's been like that kind of thing. I have a thyroid condition, which is an autoimmune condition. Um, I'm one of those people with like a lot of mysterious kind of chronic pain stuff that moves around and is related to trauma and stress and like blah, blah, blah. And I'm just one of those bodies that doesn't do the things other bodies do. Like I've had 4 hernias and
God.
I know. And like, I don't heal right, like scar tissue doesn't form the way I'm like a weird medical anomaly person. And I know that food is important. And yet it's still hard to be disciplined about it. It's still really hard. I'll shut
It's
up.
almost like you're an overachiever in life and an overachiever in food disorder.
Well, and this is the thing, I'm more like a workaholic and and I think part of it is also, and I'm not blaming anyone but myself, but that's the other thing is like, especially for women, it's so praised when you've got it all together and you're balancing 62 things. And that's seen as you being a true feminist. But like, meanwhile, my adrenal glands were like, this is not working. We hurt, like the body cannot sustain constantly working all the time. But yes, I also have to do my eating disorder. Like I'm gonna binge the most.
So I mean that all rings true to me, but like one of my questions I was gonna ask you, like on set, like how do you manage with with all that you do? And I know being on set, we work 12, 14 hours, like,
Sure.
You
had to work 12 to 14 hours. We worked like 8 to 10.
Yeah, we have really long days, but like, I mean, on the Thursday on Big Bang, we would have BLT days. And I'm like, okay, I couldn't wait for Jeanette to put that out. And like, you're just constantly eating whatever. It wasn't until I got sick where I actually had to be conscious of my diet because I, essentially would just overeat on set and like.
It's such a total mess. And I mean, for me as a person who exists in front of the camera, it's like a quadruple whammy.
Yeah.
Because also on Big Bang Theory, I mean, the 2 women that I was gratefully working next to are Kaylee Cuoco and Melissa Rauch, 2 women with unbelievable bodies, which for many people are not like possible achievements, meaning like, I mean, I'm 5'4" and Melissa's like this adorable petite, like 4'10", and like everything she wears and like she's got a tiny waist and like she's adorable. And Kaylee Cuoco's like frequently on the cover of like magazines about bodies, And so here I was just like, I'm gonna eat more pot stickers right now. So like those were very stressful years that I happened to be on. I had 2 kids in that time. I got divorced in that time. My dad died. My brother-in-law passed away within 3 months of my dad dying. Like food was my best friend and it's always available. And I'm vegan. And this is proof that just because you're vegan doesn't mean you're healthy. Like it just meant that I can still eat too much of something and not eat mindfully. And that's really what happens. And in that sense, this is going to be a really weird thing to say, but like COVID has been a really interesting kind of protection from a lot of I'm a grazer. Like I'll just kind of like eat a little bit all day. Like, and then I'll be like, but I'm fine. I haven't eaten a meal. So I'm going to get skinny. Like, no, but COVID has made it so that like, you have to be a lot more mindful. There's no open grazing table. My meal comes already portioned for me. And like, honestly, it's been helpful. Like it has. And like, when you sent me soups, like that's helpful to me because you then know this is my meal and this is what I'm eating. And it gives a sense of, I think, better closure around food so that it's not just a free for all, which is basically how you live on a set.
Well, I mean, I was going to ask you too. I mean, you've been vegan for a really long time, right? Like,
about 14 years. And then vegetarian, I mean, since I was 19 and I'm 45. So like, I'm tired of doing math, but a long time.
But that's more like it wasn't like, okay, I'm doing this like, cause I want to, you did it because like for animals and like, right?
Yeah, no, and especially in LA, like there's a lot of people who take on certain eating styles because it kind of helps restrict. I mean, it's a thing. It helps you restrict if you're counting calories or trying to lose weight. But no, my motivation was like completely, I did not want to, I loved animals and wanted to show that I loved them, not by eating them, but by not eating them. Yeah. And it's like a whole like ethical and it's spiritual and it's environmental and it's political. Yeah, but I mean, one of the people in my life who got me into being fully vegan when I was just vegetarian transitioning, she said when she became a vegan, she gained like 15 pounds in a month because she was just like eating nuts all day. She's like, this is delicious.
Oh my God, I would do it, but I became allergic to nuts. I be like all my whole body like shut down and like started to hate, like, and later in life, like in my 30s, it was like when I moved to New York is like when everything decided to,
yeah,
break down. You do talk about this a lot, but I mean, there is a correlation between mental health and chronic pain and things like that. And one of the things that I mean, I'm going off topic here, but I'm actually curious to pick your brain because it's a very smart brain. It's so funny because when I first was initially sick, which I think I actually came to set and to visit, and I was telling you and Melissa about and whatever. But I got a lot of people telling me like, I have anxiety, you're depressed, this and that. You're not really sick. It's chronic, until I started to deep dive and I actually was sick and I actually got a diagnosis, and I had 2 diagnoses. I had a syndrome called postural orthostatic tachycardia, and then I had Lyme disease. But so I sometimes have a hard time when somebody says, well, if you fix your mind, you will get out of chronic pain. And I'm like, I do all the things. I do the healing, the meditating, the working out, like all the things that you're supposed to do. But sometimes I actually just think you're sick.
Well, and I mean, look, there's a lot, just in that, there's a lot to unpack there. And, the simplest answer is also the most complicated one, which is that it's all an intersection of all of the things. And I think this is part of the challenge too, is like, there are some people who are like, well, if you don't have any fear or resentment, you'll never get cancer because cancer is caused by fear and resentment. It's like, wait a second. Sometimes you have a genetic predisposition, like sometimes like you start producing cells and they don't stop. And, so I get very nervous, honestly, when I hear people who are like, well, here's the solution. Quit your job. You have too much stress, like stop caring about your children and like everything will be fine. So, when I hear stories of people who have exceptional healing, meaning people who are like, I'm not going to use Western medicine. What you often hear are these beautiful stories of them like going to a retreat somewhere, and they typically can afford to not work, or they don't have kids or a family or parents to take care of. And they spend their entire life on diet, nutrition, and meditation, and they have no outside stressors. And I love those stories because you hear amazing things.
Right.
And, what I have found, which I think you have found too, is that Western medicine does have a set of diagnoses that can be very helpful and informative towards building whole body healing.
Yeah.
Now, do I think that the solution is always like, go to a Western doctor, get a diagnosis from a book, and then take whatever pills they tell you and just hope that that works? No. But like we have the ability in our culture, and I think you've experienced this too, to combine all the things that we learn and find what works best for us. So I have a thyroid condition. I have an overactive thyroid. Usually people have an underactive thyroid. Of course, I'm very, very unique. All my medical things have to be very special. And when I was diagnosed, I was very, very sick, and they couldn't even draw blood. My blood pressure was so high. Like you couldn't even get blood out of this body because it was it was pumping so vigorously. And what they needed to do was shut off my thyroid. And so I took 17 pills a day for like 6 months, like whatever. I took a drug that was removed from the market because it was like, whatever, so experimental. But I was very, very sick. And what I also did was I started seeing an acupuncturist, and I started looking into herbs, and I started doing all these things. But I also appreciate that that was a diagnosis that I had and had to deal with. And if I had grown up in a completely different house and in a different country and in a different, yeah, I may not have presented with Graves' disease, but I did. And so I get to do the best that I can, you know, and I get to say, what are the things that help? What are the things that don't? And for me also, like, sometimes doing things that I don't know if they work in terms of the healing modalities has been helpful. And I'm in a very fortunate position that I can say, like, what's craniosacral therapy? What's that going to do? I'm going to try that. I mean, I've done it. I've had shamans come, like, I've done all the things. But I really should like put them on a website, because Gwyneth Paltrow does all these things and she makes it so interesting and everybody wants to know. But but the fact is, like, ultimately, you're absolutely right. Sometimes there is something that needs to be treated, and the whole system needs to be supported, because as anyone with chronic pain, chronic or any kind of chronic condition can tell you, the psychological abuse that you put on yourself and that other people put on you, and people saying you caused this, you could have prevented, that's enough to send you into a depression. So it's like the whole system needs to be supported as you tackle whatever you're tackling. I hope that I mean, there's so much to your question, but
it is so much. And for me, it makes so much sense, because I talk to so many people within the Lyme community, within the chronic illness community, because it's been my world for the last few years. And you go back and forth. There's a lot of people who do antibiotics. There's a lot of people who do herbs, a lot of supplements. There's like a lot of, I go to a healer. Like, I never thought I would go to a healer, but he has helped me so much. And you do whatever you can to feel good. And that's the ultimate goal, especially as you know, and I'll try anything, like.
And also your definition of good has to shift, because like I, my pain will move around, really kind of goes wherever it wants. And there was a period of my life when my knees were in so much pain. I stopped all activities. I literally couldn't do anything. I would wince on the stairs. Like, sitting to pee on a toilet seat was like a very painful experience.
Yeah.
And for me to like be dealing with that, like, I wanted to redefine good. Because I was like, forget about even being able to sit in child's pose in yoga. I'd like to pee without crying.
Oh my God. It's so funny, because like, from like gate 2, which is like that parking structure, to our stage. And I say ours, I was at Mike and Molly at the time. So we were neighbors. It would take, what's a 5-minute walk would take me 30 minutes, because I was in so much pain in my legs and we couldn't pinpoint it.
Yep.
It's so funny, because I talk about food a lot, and people are like, oh, because food cured you. I go, no, food didn't cure me. I'm like, food helped, like, and I was really stubborn, because like, I love to cook. But I was like super stubborn about changing my diet. And ultimately, when I finally did, it helped, but it didn't cure me. Like, it's not, but it does. And like you mentioned earlier, like, it also does help mentally. Like, if you feel good with what you're putting in your body, that helps so much.
Oh, and also, like, I mean, like, food in this culture in particular, it's so, I mean, backwards it's like upside down. It's so upside down. And, I remember when I would be in college and someone had pizza and beer, or there was some party and someone was like, yeah, I was sick all day because of pizza and beer, and they didn't mean they had alcohol poisoning or anything like that. Their stomach could not tolerate dairy and gluten, right? And this was just like and I learned this in college, that like so many people just were like, oh yeah, when I eat pizza, I'm just like super sick. Like, my stomach is just destroyed. And it's like, that's actually not what that food is. Like, food's not supposed to do that to you. That means you're not processing that food. And it's different for everyone, but most people really have trouble. I mean, like, statistically speaking, most people cannot, break down dairy like that. But there's so many things like that we don't realize. Like, so many of my even seasonal allergies got so different when I changed my diet. And if I eat processed food, especially if I eat it late at night, like I wake up puffy and parched and dry. And it's like, I don't have to wake up like that, you know? Like, but those are the things that like, oh, just take an Advil, take a this, like just keep, you know, like take I mean, look, some things are good supplements, but I know so many people who have like food hangover remedies in the morning. And for a lot of people, it's caffeine because
Yeah.
it's like they're so sluggish from, and I don't mean to be one of those people who's like, you won't be tired if you just eat healthy, you know? But the fact is like clean eating makes sense to your body for a reason. It really does. I mean, yeah.
No, that's why I mean, like I started cooking and I opened my shop, and it's so funny because people will come in and be like, so this is gluten-free. I'm like, no, everything is gluten-free. Everything is dairy-free. Like they can't understand it.
Right.
You know, and they're like, this is so hard. This is so hard to keep eating like this. How do you do it? I'm like, it's actually really easy if you do it right. You just like, I always say that when somebody's like trying to go gluten-free for the first time, and again, you mentioned this, it is so easy to do gluten-free, but also in a bad way. But if you're starting off, I say do the bad way. Get the white bread that's gluten-free. It's really good. Do you know what I mean? And then you start to kind of
but that's like, and that's another one of those foods, and people are like, oh, you're just being trendy. There are people who I have spoken to and interacted with intimately whose lives have changed when they stop living off gluten. And it's a real thing. And there are many other factors like, you know, I love when people all of a sudden become scientists from like a day-long experiment. Like, oh, I didn't eat the bread and I didn't feel well. It's like, that's not how you, like, there's no scientific data to like, I tried something for 3 hours and I didn't like it, therefore it doesn't work, you know?
Right.
So, you know, my experience is that, and I don't know what to call it. I call myself gluten sensitive. I don't know that, right. I don't know that like I can never have gluten. But when I eat too much gluten, I get very uncomfortable and bloated and gassy. And I've gathered more than one data point, you know? And it's fascinating to me that like, you know, there's been some really, really interesting writing and, you know, stuff in like, you know, Harper's and things like that about like the gluten obsession and what is it. But the food that we're eating now is also so much higher in gluten than gluten ever has been in history. Like we're basically supercharging our bodies with something that is inflammatory. And that's not like me being a hippie. Gluten does things to your cellular structure. Like that's just true. It doesn't mean that it's a bad food, but you could say that too. Like tomatoes are acidic. That's not a judgment on the tomato. But if you are a person who's sensitive to acid, you should probably avoid tomatoes.
It's right. And it's like you also said, everything right now is so much more processed than it is like when our parents were growing up.
Totally.
You know what I mean? It's a different, or our grandparents, like it's a different way of eating, like everything.
Totally.
And if you're not getting organic, you're getting so many chemicals. And if you're not detoxing those chemicals, like there's just so much to it.
Well, and also like you can't have this conversation without also acknowledging like the tremendous social injustice to the way we eat and the way we feed people in this country, because it's become like this. I mean, it's the same with mental health. It's like something that rich people can afford. And if we can figure out a way for other people to have it, great. But it shouldn't be that way with food. And that's why like all these school programs that are trying to introduce more plant-based options, like that's significantly important. Teaching mindfulness to kids, no matter what demographic they fall in, these are important things that add to our general wellness, but diet is a huge one. You know, if the government continues to subsidize cheap processed food and filling everything with corn syrup because they have too much corn, we're gonna have people who crave and need a certain kind of food that's also really unhealthy. And then we're paying for the medication to fix the conditions that come from eating all the things. It's like, yeah.
You know, and 100% agree. I just had this conversation because it's not the same thing. It's kids and it's school. So it's definitely different. But the reason I started this podcast was because I wanted to talk to people that I work with in TV, because we work these long hours. We're not healthy. most of us are not healthy. We're working long hours. We're not eating. We're eating when we're told to eat. We have 5 minutes to eat. And in that time, you have like, you don't have a lot of healthy options unless you're on a hit show. If you're on a hit show, your options are much better than if you're.
Oh, and also most actors, especially the ones who have bodies that you envy, they have chefs and they have meal plans. Like, and that's a thing, and that's becoming more and more standard because like as the middle falls out economically, like there's all these meal programs now for kind of everyone to have that kind of customized experience. And but again, it's not reaching, you know, the majority of people.
Well, that's what I said to the ladies last week. I said, you know, what do we do? You know, when I was at my sickest, I hid it. I didn't want anyone to know. And I would bring with me like a refrigerator of food because I couldn't eat. So how many other people on set are that sick? And the more that I talk to people, the more that like the crews that I've worked with, it's so lovely to see. But I'm like, oh my God, everyone I talk to has a chronic condition. Almost everybody.
Oh, and like the fact that we're talking about it more is super healthy. I mean, look, we saw it just, you know, with Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, like talking about mental health, like these things are being brought to the forefront. And I think like there are so many, I mean, when you think about what our grandparents' lives were like, or great grandparents, like people were in pain all the time, emotionally, physically. There wasn't an option. No one cared. You were just happy to be alive, you know, like it was just like, what do we have to complain about? But I think it's really significant that we're having this kind of shift. And like, I used to be super ashamed to talk about it. It was actually Will Wheaton, who I got to meet on Big Bang Theory, who was one of the first people that I knew in the industry who was like, I suffer from chronic depression and it's debilitating. And I go to therapy and I take medication and I'm going to talk about it. And it was Will who really encouraged me to start sharing more openly. And a lot of that has come with revealing things also about, you know, my physical body. And, you know, there's not a Western doctor I went to who had anything to offer me except you're working too much. Because like, that's the thing also. And that's where, as we were talking about, like an integrative approach to just understanding who you are, you know, is very important, because I really thought I could just drive my body into the ground. And then I was wondering why I couldn't sleep, you know, like all these things, like I'm anxious, like all these things. So it's taken me a long time, you know, I'm 45 and apparently still learning, you know.
Well, I love that you said that, but I mean, that you realize that you're learning through every stage of your life, but we're all doing that. Like, I feel like I work in TV. That's my passion. I want to direct television. Did I ever think I'd be cooking soup for a living as well? No. Like, that's not ever
Life's what happens while you're busy making other plans.
Right. I mean, it's just like so bizarre, but like, and you know, you learn business, you learn things that like you never thought you would learn before. I mean, like, it's crazy. It's amazing. It's amazing as well, you know, and
yeah.
I don't know. I love all of it. Should I ask you some of the questions that I wrote down?
Sure.
I mean, I asked you, some of them we already covered. Like you know, we talked about, you know, you being vegan and things like that, but I have some fun ones too.
Sure.
Maybe just fun for me.
I'll try and make it fun for me too.
I was going to ask you this because I love your show, but I'm not a cat person. And I have one viewer. And he was like, are you going to ask her, does she like cats? And then I saw your screensaver was a cat.
I have 3 cats. I am a cat person. Darlene Hunt, who created our show, Call Me Cat, she's also a cat person. And I've always had cats my whole life, not a dog person. I like to say I have kids, so I don't need dogs.
I was asking you about cats, but we'll drop that because like he thinks I talk about cats too much about how they're so evil. That's in my mind. Like,
they're not evil. They're lovely. I mean, they can be. I'll be honest. There can be real bitch cats. And I have one. She lives downstairs. She lives in one room because she's so miserable with other humans and the other cats. She lives by herself in my room, my bedroom.
Just not, and then I say I'm a dog person, and then my friends are like, you just dislike animals. I'm like, that is not true. Like, I like animals. But what was your go-to food for 2020? Like, if you had
Oh my gosh.
Mine were chips.
Yeah, my go-to food was boba tea. And I actually cut like bubble tea, like
Yeah,
this.
the little, yeah.
Yeah, with the things. But I actually cut out caffeine during 2020 because it wasn't painful enough to be stuck in my house with nothing to do. I was like, let's take away my last vice. So started finding decaf, or even like green tea with almond milk and the little bubbles in the bottom. And that's been, I basically lived on that for all of quarantine and COVID.
That's good. I didn't do caffeine, and then I reintroduced it to myself. It was like the dumbest thing I could have done.
It's one of those things. I totally get it. I understand it. I don't want it. And I never liked coffee. So
God, I like love it. Well, I'm so glad I got to talk to you, obviously. You're amazing. I mean, like I always said this, on Big Bang Theory, you and Melissa were like so inviting and welcoming, but like when I had made that transition from assistant to video switcher on that show, and you guys were so supportive, and that always meant so much to me. Like you just were rooting for me, and I didn't expect it, but like I remember you being like, what's going on? And I'm like, I think I got the job. And I was like, and like, there was that, that'll always like be with me, because I just thought like, it's so nice, you don't get that with a lot of your cast that you work with. And
yeah, well, I like to think we were a special bunch in general, and I think for me and Melissa, the fact that we came in late, we were kind of the new kids. So, she and I definitely revolved in kind of similar, circles on set, but, no, it was a very special place to work. I was there for 9 years, and it changed my life, changed the course of my life. And we met a lot of wonderful women, and you were one of them. And I think also, like, even since the time I started on Big Bang to now, like the consciousness of raising women up, elevating women, giving them, at least equal opportunities has become so important. So I also remember how important it was for us to see you, able to achieve that. So
it was great. I always loved it. I mean, and it's so great because Michelle was talking about Call Me Kat, and she was just saying like, this cast, this crew, like there's something really special about it. And it's just
a very special group. Yeah. It's very special. And you can make shows where it's not special, but we're having a really, really good time, and we're really grateful to have a second season. So
right. And that's sometimes like that energy takes you down like for a long time.
We sure hope so. So it's, it's job security, for our crew also. It's been a very difficult year in our industry. And it's going to continue to be COVID. It's very difficult to make TV shows and movies during COVID. I promise. Like, it's very, very difficult, So the fact that we even got a show done without being sent home. So it was amazing. It was amazing that we got it done. So
I just want to say thank you so much. I know that this, taking the time it means the world to me.
I'm happy to do it. I'm so appreciative. Thank you.
I hope to see you soon. I mean, I would love.
I mean, maybe the world will open up and we'll actually get to interact. Here's my cat doing what she does best. Hold on, drinking from a glass of water. Addie, do you want to show? Yeah, do it. That was my water. Now it's yours.
Dang.
Cats are evil. You're right.
Cats evil. See, we're ending on a note that benefits my thoughts. But no, I really appreciate it, and I love you for doing this, and so thank you. And
thank you. It's so good to see your face, and we'll connect more about soup and other things.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
She was a video switcher in TV at the time. Then whoops, suddenly that girl's got Lyme. Her health is back on track because she switched up her diet, and now she's forcing all her friends to try it. Soup switcher from gracefully fed. Soup switcher, say bye bye to bread. If gluten's been a bitch, then